Hey there, folks. Today I'm going to be doing quiz number 7, and it is going to be your analog for your exam or practice exam number 7, which is going to be for your exam 7. So we're going to start with question number 1, and we're going to find all the solutions of 2b minus 6. Just as a quick reminder, your numbers may be different than mine on your quiz number 7, which is fine. This is a B, that's a 6. I'll try to be more clear as I do that. And when I have a squared here, to get rid of the squared, I do the square root, and actually I end up with a plus or minus the square root of 100, which is plus or minus 10. And I'm going to add 6. Divide by 2. And what's going to happen is, because the radical went away, I need to actually continue to simplify that and actually add and subtract as I do this. So let me come over here. So B is 6 plus 10 divided by 2, and 6 minus 10 divided by 2. And there we have our two answers. So number 2 is we have an equation it's a quadratic equation, which means we are most likely going to have to use the quadratic formula, which I'm going to assert over here. A in this case is 2, B in this case is 20, C in this case is 3. So plugging everything in, I get a negative 20. Be careful with the negatives here in the formula. There's negative here, negative here. You could end up with a double negative, so just we'll keep an eye on that. So here I've dumped in A, B, and C into the formula here. Now we're going to kind of crunch that together. 20 squared is 400. Minus that 6 times 4 is 24. Over 4. That's going to be 376 over 4. I am not super confident about that, so I'm going to drop that in there. So 400 minus 24. Look at that. I don't think that's a perfect square. Square root of 376. Yeah. So we're going to leave it as is. And so our answers become these here. Now you can write it in the plus or minus context, is fine. You can even write it as a decimal, that's okay too. All right, number 3, we're looking at a very similar scenario here. Negative 15x squared plus 3x plus 12 equals 0. Now I could just drop this into the quadratic formula as is. There's nothing wrong with that. A being negative 15, B being 3, C being 12. But I'm going to notice that they're all multiples of 3, and I don't like that negative at the beginning. So I'm going to actually divide out a negative 3. Again, you don't have to do this, but I like it. Now notice when I'm dividing by negative, it's going to change all the signs. Of course, 0 doesn't have a sign. It's right in the middle. It's not negative or positive. So this gives me that A is 5, B is negative 1, C is negative 4. So again, using the quadratic formula, which I have right here, I'm going to dump everything into there and push that up. I'm going to end up with x equals negative, negative 1. Again, I warned you about being careful of those double negatives. Plus or minus the square root of negative 1 squared minus 4 times A, which is 5, times C, which is negative 4. Again, we got double negative going on here. We got double negative going on here. Just be really careful. And I'm going to slant downward here. 1 plus or minus the square root of 1 plus now, because of the minus minus. 20 times 4 is 80. Ooh, we get a perfect square here. That's nice. One plus 9 is 10. 10 over 10 is 1. 1 minus 9 is negative 8 over 10. That's negative 4 over 5, it looks like to me. All right, this next one, we are going to use the quadratic formula. However, it looks like we might end up with complex answers. Let's scooch that up. Number 4, we have x squared minus 8x plus 32 equals 0. And we want to write them, if we do end up with complex numbers, in standard form. That's the a plus bi form. A is 1, b is negative 8, c is 32. Again, double negative, be careful. So I end up with 8 plus or minus the square root of 64 minus 4 times 32 is 128. Let me verify that. 4 times 32, 128. $64 minus 128, I want to say is negative 64, but let's see. 64 minus 128, negative 64, which we have learned is not a big deal. This just becomes 8 plus or minus 8i over 2. And factoring the 2 out and reducing with the 2 down below, I end up with 4 plus or minus 4i. And of course, in the computer, you'll need to write that as 2 separate answers. That's going to be 4 plus 4i, comma, 4 minus 4i into the system. All right. Number 5, they want quite a bit of information. So we have a quadratic function. And the first thing I want to know is the x-intercepts. So for the first part, they don't label it, but I'm going to label it I. This one factors, that's nice. Otherwise, we'd have to use the quadratic formula. By the way, you can always use the quadratic formula. That'll always work. You'll end up with the same answers regardless. This tells me that x is going to be 5 or -3. There are my x-intercepts. Part 2. Oh, so they asked for the smallest, which is that one. Smallest. Part 2, they asked for the biggest x-intercept. There it is. But the next one is the y-intercept. That means x equals 0. So f of 0 is 0 squared minus 2 times 0. So all that's gone. So the y-intercept is -15. Done. No problem. Part 3 is for the vertex. That is x equals -b over 2a. So I'm back to here, -b, -2 over 2 times 1 is going to give me negative, that's positive 2 over 2, that's 1. So there's my x value for my vertex. My y value, f of 1, is 1 squared minus 2 times 1 minus 15. That is 1 minus 2, which is -1, so it's -16. So the vertex is 1, -16. And the line of symmetry is exactly x equals 1. It's the x value of the intercept, but it's a horizontal line in this case. So x equals 1 is a vertical line. It's going to chop the parabola exactly into a symmetric piece. Number 6. And let me switch screens for you here. Let me blow this up a little bit so we can see a little bit better. And when I say that, I mean me, because my eyesight isn't as great as it should be. Let me go ahead and switch screens here. So we have an object dropped from a height of 220 feet will fall according to the equation h of t equals 220, that's the height, minus 16t squared. The minus 16 is because it's negative going down. And the 16 is half of the acceleration of gravity in feet per seconds, which is 32.2, I think, feet per second accelerating downward towards the Earth. And the formula requires half of that. There's a calculus reason for that. And we want to know what is the height after 2 seconds. So I'm going to go ahead and switch back the screens. And we have h of t, meaning the height depends on the time. This formula actually comes from Sir Isaac Newton. When he was creating calculus, he came up with these. Quite amazing. So they want to know the height after t seconds. So part 1, they want to know h of 2. So it starts out at 220. You can see when t equals 0, it's up at 220 feet. And so it's only going to go down from there relative to us here on Earth. That's 220 minus 16 times 2 squared. That's 220 minus 16 times 4, which is 220 minus 64. 220 minus 64. 156 feet. Part 2 says, how long until it hits the ground? Meaning when h of t equals 0. Well, that's easy. 220 minus 16t squared equals 0. Solve for t. And it says round to 2 decimal places, which is fine. And so we're going to end up with t equals, we should do plus or minus, but negative time doesn't really work out so much for us. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to do the square root of 13.75. and it says, again, 2 decimal places, so 1 seconds. Seconds, yeah. There you have it. And our last question. Let me switch screens so you can see what I'm looking at. A rectangle is drawn so that the width is 7 inches longer than the height. If the rectangle's diagonal measurement is 37 inches, find the height. So let me draw a picture here. So we have a rectangle. And if this is the height, then the length is h plus 7. If the diagonal, here's the diagonal. We're going to pretend like that's a straight line. It's 37 inches. Then we're going to have to use the Pythagorean Theorem. That's going to be h squared plus h plus 7 squared equals 37 squared. 37 squared is 1369. Now, when I square this binomial, I have to use the formula, or you can FOIL it out, meaning h plus 7 times h plus 7. Either way, you're going to end up with h squared plus 14h plus 49. And you can see that I have a quadratic here. So I'm going to get it equal to 0. So I'm going to move this over, and I'm going to combine that up all in one step. 49 minus 1369. And I'm going to notice that they're all even, 2, 14, negative 1320. And I'm going to divide everything through by 2 just to make the number smaller. So I have h squared plus 7h minus 1320 divided by 2, 660 equals 0. Now this may factor. I'm not going to spend time trying to do that. I'm just going to use the quadratic formula because I think it's going to save me a bunch of time. So h is going to equal negative 7 plus or minus the square root of 7 squared minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is negative 660. And even though that number is big, I like that that's turning a negative negative into a positive. $26.40. Plus 49. It should be positive. So let's do this. Let's write that out. So it's 2591, 2591 over 2. And they asked for it up to 1 decimal point. So let's see if this is a square root. So square root of 2591 is a decimal. That's fine. Minus 7 divided by 2. So one of the answers is 21.95. So this is approximately equal to. One of the answers is negative 7 minus the square root of 2591 equals divided by 2. Negative 28.95. And to be clear, since we are talking about the length of a rectangle, we can actually dump out the negative 1. It has no bearing on what it is that we're trying to do. That's it. Good luck on your test. I hope you do well.